Hi there, this is Solid Ronin from Solid Ronin Films, and welcome to another video. I thought I would do something up to date, so I'm going to talk about The Invisible Man, which started in 1933. This is the Universal box set on Blu-ray. This is the Legacy box set, which has 6 Invisible Man / Woman films. They kind of released the individual Blu-rays, have been available for a while. This is Invisible Man, strangely enough. And Region A always had the kind of box sets with the multiple films, but over the past few months we've had Region B releases of the Legacy sets. So it's Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Wolfman, Frankenstein and Dracula. I only have the Invisible Man and the Wolfman Legacy sets. I might pick up Frankenstein and Dracula in the future. I don't think I'll pick up Creature from the Black Lagoon. That's just a 3-film set, and to be honest, the first Creature from the Black Lagoon isn't really my cup of tea. But The Invisible Man, I love the Claude Rains original film based on the H.G. Wells book. The Invisible Man story has been remade and redone so many times because it's just a great idea, but it is kind of unusual within the Universal monsters, because Invisible Man isn't really a monster particularly, but what makes the story kind of interesting is he's not really fully a bad guy, but he's not necessarily a good person either. The original with Claude Rains, he's a scientist who perfects this formula to make himself invisible, but the side effect is that you go a little bit mad. And there's always a scene where he craves ultimate power over the world, and he'll be able to rule the world because he's invisible. The special effects for the time, 1933, are pretty impressive, and they do kind of hold up today. I would rather have these special effects than CGI, personally. So in the Legacy set, you get The Invisible Man from 1933, which I would recommend to anybody to pick up. You get The Invisible Man Returns from 1940. You get The Invisible Woman from 1940. Invisible Agent from 1942. The Invisible Man's Revenge from 1944. And Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man from 1951. The only extras are on the original Invisible Man disc from 1933. The prints on these are really good. I mean, for a film that's from 1933, the print on the Invisible Man is just spectacularly good. So The Invisible Man comes in a separate disc. Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man comes in a separate disc. But Invisible Agent and The Invisible Man's Revenge is on the same disc and Invisible Man Returns and Invisible Woman are on a disc as well. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the films. I mean, I picked this up on eBay for £15. So for 6 films, that's quite a good deal. I mean, the first one is just solid gold. The second one's an interesting film, Invisible Man Returns, from 1940. So bizarrely it took 7 years for them to do a sequel of sorts. It's set 9 years after the original film, and it's a relative of Claude Rains' character. So it's the Griffin family, not to be confused with people in Family Guy. And the Invisible Man in this film is played by Vincent Price. And it's quite interesting because this is 1940, so it's before Laura. It's must have been one of his first films when he was trying to be a leading man. And as we know, that didn't quite work out just because of his body type and his face. He didn't quite fit into that leading man role. But it's really quite interesting because his voice, because he's also a young man when he played this, so his voice isn't even the Vincent Price voice. There's little twangs you hear where you go, well, that's actually Vincent Price, but it's not full blown, that wonderful theatrical voice that he later developed. So it is an interesting film from that point of view. So he's on death row for, as we find out, a crime he didn't commit. So with the help of a doctor friend, he gets the invisible serum and escapes and wants to clear his name. It also stars Sir Cedric Hardwicke as the villain, and he actually appears in another Invisible film. And it is a really enjoyable film. It rattles along. Obviously Vincent Price also has the "I'm going to take over the world because I'm invisible, people will worship me because I'm invisible" speech, like everybody does in these films. But it's a great performance by him, and it's just tremendously good fun. And then we move on to 1942, The Invisible Woman, which has no reference to the Griffin family. And this one is played pretty much just for laughs. The first two are actually quite dark. You know, there's murder in them, there's mayhem. This one is played just as a farce. It features a scientist who makes the serum and wants a human volunteer. This fashion model signs up because she sees it as a good way of getting back on her annoying boss. There's also shady criminal types that want the serum so the gangster boss can go back and visit his family in the homeland. I mean, it's very light. It is strictly for laughs, but it's an enjoyable 77 minutes. Because that's the thing about these films, they are relatively short. So even if you don't like one of them, there's another one coming along in 77 minutes time. So it's an enjoyable romp. The next one is Invisible Agent, which goes back to the Griffin family. It opens up with Cedric Hardwicke, who's working for the Nazis, and Peter Lorre playing a Japanese agent. Yep, it was those days where Peter Lorre played Mr. Moto and other Chinese or Japanese characters. And they find a descendant of Claude Rains' character and torture him to get the serum. There's nice work with a printing press, trying to put his fingers through a printing press. That's quite nice. But he escapes them and then falls in with the US government, who want him to give them the serum in the battle against the Nazis, which he says he's not interested in doing. It's going to take something dramatic to make him sign up for it. And then of course we cut to newsreel footage of Pearl Harbor, and then it cuts to him going, okay, I'm in, but I've got one stipulation: I'm the only person that can use the invisible agent. So he goes over to Germany, gets parachuted in, invisible obviously, and he meets his contact, who's a woman who's playing both sides. There's a little bit of To Be or Not to Be, even though they were both made in 1942, which is quite interesting. Unfortunately, the actor who's playing the Invisible Man, John Hall or Robert Hall, I've actually forgotten his name, but he is quite bland, and he's not the best actor in the world. So any kind of hopes of on-screen charisma or chemistry kind of goes by the wayside. Again, it's an enjoyable little film. It's obviously, none of these other films are the standard of The Invisible Man, which was directed by James Whale. But The Invisible Agent is, again, it's another fun hour and a quarter. So we go on to The Invisible Man Revenge from 1944. Now this is an odd film. Again, this stars John Hall or Robert Hall, or it's probably a completely different actor's name. And he plays, again, a descendant of the Griffin family who has been missing for 4 years after he found diamonds for this couple, and then he had an accident and he's been lost for 4 years. So he comes back to England to get what's rightfully his, but he does kind of take little fits of rage. And the thing about this film is, you know, Claude Rains in the original was maybe a little bit crazy, and you perhaps didn't root for him all the time. But unfortunately, the Invisible Man in The Invisible Man's Revenge is just a total dirtbag. I mean, he's a complete scumbag. He has no interest in anybody else's feelings, so it's very difficult to root for him. You know, the whole point is you want like a hero who's, you know, been double crossed and he gets his revenge, but like you don't actually want him to succeed because he's a scumbag. In this film, it's the Doctor played by the wonderful John Carradine, who invents the invisible reagent, or has the invisible reagent, and this odious character volunteers because he's got nowhere else to go and the police are hunting him, so he volunteers and then obviously goes mad and wants to take over the world. Yeah, I'm sure the label on the syringe is like, caution, side effects may contain megalomania. So it's an odd film in the sense that the person that you're supposed to be rooting for is an absolute git, and you really don't want to root for him. There's no lessons learned. You know, he's just a complete swine. Yeah, it's an interesting film. And then we have Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man from 1951. Now you either like Abbott and Costello or you don't. So if you don't, you're probably not going to like this film. But if you do, it's one of their kind of funnier efforts that goes by quickly. It rattles along at a nice pace. They are two private detectives that take the case of a boxer who's framed for the murder of his manager, and involves Lou Costello becoming a boxer, and obviously the invisible character who is the boxer. Obviously he gets in the ring with Lou when Lou Costello has to fight, so there's plenty of fun to be had with that. Again, the overall kind of message of the Invisible Man, I guess, is another science gone wrong. You know, we have to watch science, we have to be careful about science. Fortunately, that doesn't persist in America anymore. So Frankenstein was obviously about mad scientists and how science shouldn't be trusted. The Invisible Man is about science gone mad. You know, yes, you can have a thing like invisibility that might have advantages, but at what cost? Megalomania. The Wolfman is probably the one that's the most innocent, in the sense it's a curse, and the way Lon Chaney plays it, you really feel that he's cursed, you know, and he just wants to die. Obviously Dracula, there's no signs involved, it's merely the supernatural. So some of the Universal monsters are science is bad and not to be trusted, look what they create. And some of it is old world superstition and old world myths and curses. I suppose you could argue Creature of Black Lagoon, I think, is science as well, because it's not something to do with radiation that creates the creature from the Black Lagoon. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit. So I would, if you can get it cheap, I would recommend this box set, certainly for the first two films. And if you're a fan of Abbott and Costello, it's a good way of getting their Invisible Man film on Blu-ray. The other films are interesting curiosities with nice little details and amusing moments, like in Invisible Man's Revenge. There's a darts game that he gets involved with. You know, in Abbott Costello is the speed bag that Lou Costello is supposed to be punching, but it's also the Invisible Man. There's card games. There's obviously lots of invisibility joke business. And The Invisible Woman is actually better than I thought it would be. It's just nice, enjoyable fun. So I hope you enjoyed this modern, up-to-date release of the Invisible Man Legacy box set. Please let me know in the comments below which Invisible Man film you prefer and why. And hopefully we'll see you again for more videos down the road. This is Solitude saying thanks very much for watching, and farewell.